Steve.
Yes.
Good for you. Come on up.
Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
So, you guys ready?
Ready. Yes.
All right. So,
So we're not Beyonce, just in case you were confused. I want to
not
set the
Jay-Z.
tone right now.
No, so, but we'll keep up. So Scott will take us there because you've been totally awash in this stuff for a long time, right? So in '89, you joined Dun & Bradstreet. You were doing finance for a while. Then you led a product. Then you moved over to sales. So then it hit Oracle a few years later, sales, Ariba, sales, Salesforce, you were vice president. Get Satisfaction, you were the VP of sales. And then you joined DocuSign in May of 2013, so you've been there about a year. So you still have the liberty to talk freely because you're under the honeymoon, I hope, still on the honeymoon, so you can talk freely about all the mistakes you've made in marketing tech. But it's a really interesting company. Why did we choose DocuSign? We reached out because they have some really unique challenges on both the consumer individual side and then the B2B side. They've got 135,000 leads created a quarter and 40,000 new users daily. And I mean, I think maybe I could just skip to that. I mean, you've got a sales team of, when I was just doing the math, 25 salespeople. So I just did the math this morning. That means about 5,300 leads a quarter, 70 a day per salesperson. As a ratio for industry average, I mean, how does that stand? Is that pretty high for
I think it's
leads
pretty
per
high.
salesperson?
I think it's high. You know, we're fortunate because we actually serve the consumer to the large enterprise. I mean, 20% of our bookings plan is an e-commerce, web-driven set of numbers. Half is kind of mid-market companies, and the rest is global or large enterprises. So the texture of those leads are all different. And in fact, to be real specific, I only have capacity to get through 125,000 leads a quarter. So using technology to sort through those and being really smart about predictive technologies to actually figure out which ones to go after and which ones to sort of let settle at the bottom.
So that's the number
the only way we can survive.
So that first number is the number you could go through without any technologies helping you parse through that. Okay.
No, actually, period. I will absolutely not get to 10,000 leads this quarter.
Okay.
So I have to be able to make sure that I'm being smart about the prioritization of what we're going after.
And just throwing a lot out without even looking at
Yep.
it, right? So I'm going to take a step back and just ask you how you would characterize, now that you've been there for a little more than a year, how would you characterize the return on investment in the marketing tech strategy that you guys have put in place?
So just for the error of my sins, I'm now running sales operations, not just quota-carrying sales. And I'm a very close partner with our marketing demand gen VP, Megan Eisenberg, who would be here if she just hadn't had a baby. We're almost interchangeable, which sort of tells you something about how we communicate. And for us, the only metric that counts that we both hold jointly is pipeline growth. So we measure that. And today we use Eloqua in marketing and Salesforce as our system of record for sales. So it's what opportunities we create through the lead pass in the Salesforce that we measure to understand where we are. And then we look at the conversion rates of those and what closes. But what's interesting is that, think about the lines of business we're in. So some of those pipeline programs influence an e-commerce purchase or trial freemium process. Some affect an inbound-driven, what I call corporate sales motion, where the salesperson is a salesperson quoted, but they're on the phone, and they're largely being handed inbound opportunities to work based on the demand gen engine we built. And then we even have large customers where there's still people doing research that we can pick up and add data to and say, hey, I know you work in UBS or Merrill Lynch, just so you know, this guy's been on the website, he's done this analysis. So it's different in the lane that you're in, but we've seen a lot of direct sales growth in e-commerce, sales growth in sort of trial creation and conversion. We can talk about that a little bit later, actually some cool stuff on harvesting freemium. And a lot of half our plan is the inbound driven sales guy, and there's been tremendous impact on the leads and the quality of the leads that we pass to them.
Great. So you're growing, I think you said, 100% a year?
More or less,
in terms of revenue a year?
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit how, with that growth, how do you keep up with the technology that's out there? Right. So I mean, you make some bets. You got the CRM, and you come in with these, fairly established legacy systems that are already operating in the company, right? So Eloqua, I think, is your marketing automation.
Correct.
How do you stay up with all the technology that's that's out there with such rapid growth?
So it's an interesting transition, right? Our marketing organization, we have a CMO, and he has a VP of demand gen.
Yeah.
And Megan Eisenberg's demand gen VP, she has a director of marketing technology. And when she and her team started 2 years ago, we had Salesforce and Eloqua, and that was it. And now we have 15 different technologies deployed, either directly plugged into one of those two tools or around it. We use Influitive to do campaign stuff. We're using Lattice Engines to do lead scoring, Demandbase to do augmentation and data analysis. So it's amazing how many components that are there, and literally, in some ways, and I don't repeat this, we have a shadow IT team, because it takes that level of expertise to build those systems out and to connect them.
So now, since you span both B2B and B2C, I would imagine that poses a challenge when it comes to targeting the right prospects. Can you talk a little bit about how you do that, how you segment audiences?
Yeah.
Maybe you take us through your learning process for the audience out there. What I would imagine a lot of folks are going through that procedure right now.
Great question. So on the Eloqua side, we have about 20 different personas defined. We have a ton of different campaigns that we run. But when we looked at kind of the scoring model, we started with one scoring model, which was modeled using actually the stuff from Lattice Engines, going back, doing regression analysis and data on what we had in Salesforce, what deals closed, what deals didn't. And we learned that clearly sort of high-tech companies, people that had used SaaS applications, that were using other SaaS applications, that had a certain set of characteristics on their website, all data that Lattice Engines can sort of meld together, had a really high profile for purchasing. So we set that program up, and we ran that as the lead scoring component, and set some baselines, and then realized that, and I don't know how much you know about DocuSign in general, but we're about 10 years old, and we started really as a solution in real estate. So our founder, Tom Gonzer, felt bad that his wife had all the paperwork and created DocuSign to help her job and make it a little easier for her.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're a verb in real estate, and we still have a large market share there. And with this model, none of the leads coming from real estate seem to be popping up. We actually found they were mutually exclusive. So real estate companies, by and large, don't use SaaS apps, don't have the same website characteristics. They're more graphic-centric than they are sort of JavaScript or more technically enabled. And so we had to create a second model to score out those components. And what we found is actually those leads that had the real estate characteristics had a higher conversion rate than the corporate rate. But we were dropping them when we were just a single model.
Interesting.
So it's important to know your business enough to build out the right set of attributes and multiple set of attributes so you don't actually block out good leads because you're actually stepping on them and not separating them the right way.
Yeah. I apologize. Sometimes I get so deep into this, I just assume everyone knows what DocuSign is. Get a show of hands. Who's heard of or knows what DocuSign does? Okay, so we probably don't need to go into too much depth about what you do, but you are differentiated from EcoSign and some others because you're actually doing e-signatures and transactions more than just signatures. You're going across all digital transactions, right? Can you talk a little bit about that product development? And
Our sort of tagline, if you will, is keep business digital.
Yeah.
And so the signature is a fundamental experience in what we do. You need to have a rock solid product that anybody can sign anywhere at any time, and that's a hallmark of how we built the business up from the beginning.
Yeah.
But what we found is that what's almost more interesting is probably an overstatement, but what's very interesting is what happens with the transaction downstream. So think of a very simple sales order. If I'm in Salesforce and I hit a button and the document goes out with DocuSign and gets signed, that's great. It's better than me having to fax it. But what's really great is, in fact, Salesforce themselves does this today using our technology. When you DocuSign your Salesforce order form, your seats automatically provision. So Meredith Schmidt, the VP of Revenue Operations, has a 5-minute SLA where from the time you call the sales rep and order it to the time the seats are provisioned, it's 5 minutes. And that's because there's no operations analyst having to look at the signed order form and going over to the provisioning system and rekeying the information. It's all connected. And so when you take that flow across several different business processes or use cases, our biggest industry is financial services, wealth management in particular. And the most common use case is you log into your wealth manager portal, you sign up for a new account, and when you sign it, it will automatically transfer that data into the funding system and your money will move, as opposed to anybody having to rekey things. So just keeping the transaction digital, and then if you just fast forward all that, you have all of this information in one spot. So when the auditors or the regulators come and you have compliance issues to manage, it's a completely different experience to be able to comply with those kind of requests that industry by industry are different, but certainly insurance, financial services, and pharma have tremendous regulations where we can ease the pain and lower the risk of that.
So I wanted to get back to segmenting some of those industries and lead scoring. You talked about Lattice Engines. Can you talk about how you fell upon them? I mean, there's a lot of these new companies out there that I'm sure the audience has been hearing about. So Infer and inside sales and some of the overlap in terms of what they do. Can you talk a little bit about how did you select Lattice Engines?
So interesting. The marketing folks did the research on how to solve a problem because we knew that we were being inundated with leads.
Yeah.
We couldn't grow capacity to handle them.
Yeah.
So we needed to be smarter than just a basic scoring mechanism on leads. But it was a joint decision. So back to kind of a general theme about interacting between sales and marketing, it wasn't done in a black box, and they didn't just come to us and say, hey, we have some new stuff. We sat down together, we plotted out sort of the requirements, we went through the demos together, and ultimately, although actually to be totally candid, marketing funded the budget, we were at the table with them and we understood what the benefit was and what the trade-offs were. And it's important because you can't work in a vacuum. If we don't, as the sales part of that equation, share with them what we're finding in the market's working, what messages are working, what customers are there. I mean, some of it's data-driven, a lot of it's data-driven, but a lot of it is just communicating how we continue to evolve our message. So this is a good example, right? 3 years ago, our focus was the signing experience in e-signature. 3 years later, we've created a category called digital transaction management.
Yeah.
So if we're not in sync with that messaging and put it back into our demand gen programs, then we're not optimizing what we're actually going after.
Yeah. Scott, you've obviously got a really good alignment of marketing and sales. Could you talk a little bit about the history of that? I mean, did you have to go in and fight for your position at the table, or was the company? I mean, how did the company get to a point where this great harmony actually appeared, where you have, sales, marketing, and product working just ingeniously together?
So I chuckle because, to be candid, at DocuSign, it's been easy. I mean, it's having a partner that's aligned at the basic level, saying, look, we're going to measure this. I mean, that honestly is the core. A marketer who says, I'm only as good as what we can measure,
right?
That's kind of, they've already moved to the middle.
So did that come from the marketing side? So the CMO was driving that?
Actually, it was really to Megan's credit. And that's a metric that I was used to. With Salesforce, we had the same mindset. I mean, everyone in marketing was driven on pipeline development. Okay. The only thing they cared about was growing pipeline. It was measured. But sadly, in other parts of my career, I've not quite had that alignment. Yeah. And I've spent a fair amount of energy in previous roles building messaging and doing stuff and assuming you get no leads. Right. And maybe one pops in, but that's not the case here.
Can you talk a little bit about how product fits into that? Because a lot of people say that's like the third stool sometimes, right? Where you've got the marketing and sales, but you're just constantly in communication with products, with the feedback loop into where you want to go on the product.
So it's interesting because for us, there's probably the most vibrant interaction with product is in the freemium world. So what we look at is trying to instrument freemium so we have some notion of whether or not we're providing features that people are willing to pay up for. I mean, that's a complete science experiment. And so we've actually had a lot of success with Demandbase because I think we've got about 17,000 freemium customers. And when we went and ran Demandbase against that, it was a pretty high correlation. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was a significant number of those freemium customers were sort of recognized by Demandbase. So we could augment who they were and build out a profile of who might convert, and then put them into a lead program as we would anyone else. And that's actually, we've just started that, so I don't have results for it. But it's just a good collaboration between, to your point, product who sort of owns the trial experience, marketing who's trying to extract data from that, and then ultimately sales who will be downstream of any success we pull from that. Yeah,
the freemium product is great. I mean, I'm sure most of us got accustomed to DocuSign from using that freemium. I certainly did. Can you talk a little bit about how you've thought about that freemium product and how you build that out and how you're measuring that and how you're segmenting it so that you know which ones to convert?
Yeah, so it's From a demand-based perspective, it's great. It's actually similar to the program we talked about before. We can immediately understand the attributes of the entity itself and whether they fit the profile of people that tend to convert.
Yeah.
And so then we're running a campaign against that and putting them into a sort of drip campaign and going after them. And we haven't got the results yet, but what's very impressive early on was the correlation of what Demandbase is able to recognize from the freemium pool, so that we could have a lot more data than just that was shared. It's also important to note too, when we have folks sign up for the trial, we ask them for less information in the hope that they'll actually sign up for the trial, because we can augment the rest of the demographic information from Demandbase. So that actually makes the whole convert process better. And that's just another interesting thing while we're talking about some of our Demandbase experiences. So we've also, think about what we do for a moment, right? I mentioned just in my brief comments that we have financial services and insurance and real estate, but our product is very industry specific. So the messaging for it, from a marketing perspective, is best consumed in the words of the industry. So by using Demandbase on the way in, we're able to provide an industry specific set of landing pages based on your IP address and who you are, in many cases, so that your first DocuSign experience is going to feel customized. And so for that, which we've been doing for a while, we saw the bounce rate go from 35 to 13%, and the conversion rate on top of that even higher. And so in our business, that's critical, because it's funny, you asked a product question before, which is a great question. In several ways, the product's pretty horizontal, but the positioning of the product and how people think about it and consume it is very industry specific. So we have to go to great lengths to describe the kind of use cases you can use, how you might apply it to your business that will feel very unique for you versus the person next to you in a different industry. End of the day, I'm probably packaging a very similar product, but that layer of how we describe it is really, really important.
Yeah, so we asked for some specifics and just some really impressive what time frame was this? So you targeted 450 plus companies and had 1 million impressions delivered, attracted 59% of all companies targeted to your website, generated relevant interest with 13 average page views per company, grew sales pipeline by 22% for your top 6 industries, increased average time on the site by more than 8 minutes, boosted page views by 300%. What was the time frame for that? And that was mostly demand-based, is it?
Yeah, that was mostly statistics driven from the demand-based work. I think it was a 6-month period.
Yeah. Great. So we're kind of running out of time.
Yeah.
Just had
it's flashing lights.
I could go on. I'm only halfway through my questions, but there's one question about standardization that comes up. Right? There's all these tech vendors out there, and you've got these big marketing clouds. You got Salesforce, you got Adobe, and Oracle, and IBM. Are you pushing for standardization, or is everything so modularized that you can live with this world of just multivariate offerings for some time?
So I slightly self-serving, being a SaaS provider ourselves, but it doesn't feel broken, right? So we have a platform. Eloqua is a platform for marketing. Sales is a platform for sales. Those are pretty well instantiated, but things, given the API infrastructure of both, plug in so seamlessly that I don't think we feel like we're bolting stuff together.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm old enough that I've gone through the true bolt-on period, and the API economy doesn't really provide that. I mean, it's a pretty simple, hey, I'm in this experience, but it's going to push it here. I mean, look at us. We're often consumed as a product inside of someone else's application. More people use us inside of Salesforce or inside a website than they would log into a native console called DocuSign. So the more that everything almost kind of consumes itself into itself, given APIs, the less it feels like we're in need of some big consolidation. So for us, it's been pretty easy.
Great. Thank you, Scott. I told you he was going to take us there. Thank you, Beyonce. Appreciate it.
I thought it was Jay-Z.